Welcome to this DSIAC webinar. We are DSIAC, which along with CSIAC and HDIAC comprise the DoDIACs. Operating under the Defense Technical Information Center within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense. Our mission is to facilitate interagency collaboration, disseminate scientific and technical information, and reduce redundancy amongst those who support the U.S. government. To achieve this, we offer several free services and contract vehicles, including monthly webinars. Our webinars are hosted by subject matter experts on emerging research and technology topics. Technical inquiries. Submit a question and we will spend approximately 4 hours digging into an answer for you, enough to give you a jump start on your research or project, all at no cost to you. Technical publications. Peer-reviewed reports covering critical technology areas, with focus areas including autonomous systems, C4ISR, energetics, and weapon systems, plus support from our sister IACs. We help navigate the vast landscape of scientific and technical information to give you a research boost. Visit our website to learn more.
Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar presentation. My name is Philip Payne. I'm the guest host today. I'm the technical lead for the Cybersecurity Information Systems Information Analysis Center, or CSIAC. Before we get started today, I want to note a couple of administrative items. First, if you are dialed in on the phone and would like a copy of the slides, they were posted to the webinar announcement. You can go to DSIAC.dtic.mil/webinars and find today's webinar. I'll also put a link to the slides in the chat. When you click on it at the bottom announcement, it'll say download presentation. Second, all participants are muted, but feel free to chat using the attendee chat window on the lower right-hand side of the webinar screen. You can use that to chat with each other. I'll be monitoring that chat as well. However, if you'd like to pose a question for the Q&A session at the end, please click the 3 dots labeled more/panel options to bring the Q&A window up as part of your layout. At the end of the presentation, I'll go over the Q&A. For the benefit of those on the phone, I will read the questions out loud to the presenters. If you have any technical issues during the presentation, please have no fear. The full presentation will be available online. Please check back to the DSIAC website. Once the webinar is posted, the GoToWebinar button will take you to the YouTube link. With that said, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have the technical lead for DSIAC, Taylor Knight. We also have Deanna Malonis from HDIAC, who's a research inquiry analyst. And we have Eric Hundman. Dr. Eric Hundman is an experienced defense policy analyst, China expert, and open source researcher. He has over 15 years of experience managing and conducting a wide variety of research projects for defense, business, and academic customers. Dr. Hundman is a globally recognized expert on China's military and foreign policy, who more broadly specializes in defense policy, military organization, emerging technologies, and research methods. His research, analysis, and commentary have been published in peer-reviewed journals such as the International Security Journal of Global Security Studies and Journal of Contemporary China, as well as in public-facing outlets such as Foreign Policy, China File, Wired, Political Violence at a Glance. He is fluent in Mandarin Chinese and spent 8 years living in China and Taiwan. He received a PhD and MA in Political Science from the University of Chicago and a BS in Physics and Political Science from Yale University. With that said, Taylor, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. There are 3 presenters today, so we're going to kind of be passing off the mic. Deanna's going to get started, so I'm going to go off video until it's kind of my portion, just so it's easier for you to pay attention to the slides. But Deanna, just let me know when you need me to advance, and then the 3 of us are going to, tag team this and make sure that we get all this information into your hands.
Thanks, Taylor and Phil. So this webinar is based off of a state-of-the-art report that we all did. Came out at the end of 2024, and we're going to be looking at the attritable UAVs and conceptualization from a viewpoint that began in the beginning of 2024, and that this is not an all-inclusive list of everything, because this is a topic that's continuing to evolve as we speak. Next slide. Next slide. So a little note on the terminology. The term attritable has been used recently to describe a new class of unmanned platforms, particularly in light of the Replicator initiative. The root of attritable comes from attrition, and attrition is a common military strategy That means destroying an opponent's forces faster than they can be replaced, while at the same time ensuring one's own rate of loss remains bearable. When defining these unmanned platforms, attritable should not be confused with expendable, as they're meant to be low cost and recoverable. The intent of this equipment is not to be lost, but to have a higher rate of loss that may be deemed acceptable by the commander. Next slide. The operations in the air domain are critical to the U.S. military defense strategy. Starting in the 1990s, the military began to replace manned aircraft with unmanned aircraft, which is also referred to as uncrewed aircraft or UASs. Unmanned aircraft remove the danger of putting a pilot at risk of injury, capture, or death. They can be deployed for longer durations of time in dangerous settings, and they're typically cheaper than manned aircraft. Next slide. For the United States to be able to protect the nation if forced to engage in near-peer fight, the need for attritable UASs that can be deployed in the battle space and to affordably accomplish their missions increases. The DoD is currently in an experimental phase of developing concepts for attritable unmanned system employment, and the efforts primarily are centered in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force. Next slide. So a lot of these drones are typically used for ISR missions in a variety of ways, but they're also used for loitering munitions, counter drone assets, and air power support. And for the cost overview, I would say that they've kind of determined that they usually cost between 2 to 20 million. And the U.S. Air Force has created a nice definition for this, which can be seen here. And it describes them between your expendable drones that you are one-man flights versus your sophisticated drones that are used for a multitude of years. Next slide.
Okay, hi everyone, and I should first thank the team for an overly kind introduction. That was a little bit embarrassing on my part, actually, but I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that I'm currently directing research at Blue Path Labs. But I was tasked on this project to talk about how the Department of Defense is actually conceptualizing attritable UAVs, which does not necessarily mean the types of missions that Deanna just mentioned in terms of are they loitering munitions versus, aircraft support, something like that. We're talking about how the Department of Defense is actually thinking about incorporating them into the force. So that means, specifically who is using them, how are they deciding how to use them in a given mission, where are they being procured from, how is the production working, all of that sort of things. So with that, please go to the next slide. So the background here is that, broadly speaking, as Deanna hinted in her introduction, the Department of Defense is still very much at an experimental stage in terms of understanding how they want to conceptualize the use of attritable UAVs specifically. There has been more progress, which I can talk about more in Q&A if people are interested, on the sort of counter small UAVs. That has been something that has been on the department's radar for many years. But in terms of incorporating them into the US's own forces, that's made much less progress, I guess I would say. And so as this slide highlights, the Army has probably made the most progress in developing its conceptualizations of attritable UAVs. So it admits publicly, in fact, just today there was a report in the Politico by the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army claiming that they need to move much faster on this, but they just still need to define what roles, requirements, and capabilities are held where. So what's happening at the theater level, what is happening at the tactical level and the division level, right? So one example of this is a document that was issued in June 2023, the Joint Small Uncrewed Aircraft Systems Capability Development Document, which laid out the Army's priorities for these types of drones in some specificities. So they're focusing on reconnaissance for now, and they've divided them into small, medium, and large. Next slide, please. Sorry, I thought there was a little bit more information on the next one, but so in terms of what they're working on with the small, medium, and large UAVs that they've identified as priority tranches, they have made progress on identifying drones in the small category for reconnaissance. And reportedly, I think this summer, they're supposed to actually start purchasing a Skydio version of a small drone, but I have not heard an update on whether that has actually happened or not. They're still saying they need to do more research on the medium range and long range versions of these reconnaissance drones. So then the sort of next most developed branch in terms of using attritable unmanned UAVs is the Air Force. And again, similar to the Army, the concepts for using them remain kind of scattered and experimental. So one prominent example here is the US Air Force Next Generation Air Dominance program, which is aimed in part at producing what is being called collaborative combat aircraft to supplement other airborne capabilities. So these are typically just above the threshold for attritable based on the Department of Defense's definition, which I should mention is not necessarily the same as how a Ukrainian officer would define attritable drones, right? We can talk about that more if it's useful, but it is intended, this collaborative combat aircraft program, it is intended to be complementary to the Replicator initiative, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with and which we will talk about more in a few minutes. But next slide, please. So the Navy and the Marine Corps, also by their own sort of public pronouncements, are the furthest behind in terms of conceptualizing how exactly they want to use attritable unmanned aerial drones, right? They do currently fly a few. They've issued requests for information on potential new platforms, but for the moment, they seem more focused on surface and underwater platforms. You know, the oversight of small drone use resides in the Naval Air Systems Command for both the Navy and the Marines. But for instance, the US Military Corps aviation plan does not mention small tactical drones at all. It's not something that they've kind of worked into their doctrinal document production, let's say. Next slide, please. So moving from the service branches to the joint force level, right? The Pentagon is also kind of wrestling with how it wants to view the usefulness of these types of small attritable drones in general. The highest level way they've been worked into plans has been in combination with other ISR assets. So in the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control plan, the department requested $1.4 billion in fiscal year 2025. Lawmakers have been pushing back on that a little bit. They want less of a broad scope specifically for drones. They want more specificity in how they would be used. And as far as I'm aware, that debate has not yet been resolved. So another point to bring up here, right, is that you know, as I mentioned before, reconnaissance is kind of the focus of the department at the moment, as far as we can tell. There are a number of other ways that attritable drones can be used, but there is sort of a larger question here that whether the degree to which drones are revolutionary, in the sense that they require kind of a paradigm shift in the way that the department views the use of these tools, right? The Pentagon, so far as we can tell from publicly available information, appears to generally assess drones as revolutionary. And this is, you know, drawn from the Ukrainian experience and a number of other things. There are some external analysts, notably Stacy Pettyjohn, who disagree with this and argue that drones will ultimately be kind of integrated into our current decision-making and mission structures for the department. So that is a debate that's out there. Let's go to the next slide, please. There is another debate that's going on largely between the Pentagon and Congress, although to some degree, as far as I can tell, within the Pentagon itself, as to the degree to which the use of small attritable drones should be centralized within the department, right? So in 2024, lawmakers hope the Pentagon would designate a new single go-to senior official to oversee this kind of suite of pursuits regarding small drones, right? In the draft fiscal year 2025 defense policy bill, there was a call for the Army to establish a dedicated drone corps, but there are others that have gone public from within the forces that argue that actually we're not quite there yet in terms of centralizing things to this degree. It would be better to leave the service branches in various laboratories and things like that to experiment with different ways of using these and ways of incorporating them into our mission needs, right? So that's also very much a debate that seems to be live, at least. Next slide, please. So this brings me to the Replicator 1 initiative, which I referenced briefly a few slides ago. So this is kind of the highest level push to get the department to develop, design, and procure small attritable drones specifically, right? So this was a program that was announced in August 2023 by then Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks. And so the idea is that they would move very quickly, both cut through red tape within the department to be able to, you know, deploy these things quickly, as well as figure out which platforms they wanted to deploy and develop the ones that were the most useful. And so notably here, this program was explicitly aimed at hindering the People's Republic of China's advantages in the use of small drones, right? So for many years, as many of you are aware, a lot of the wargaming on sort of a potential Pacific conflict has focused on the potential use by the PRC of swarms of small drones. And so the idea here was that that is a capability that we did not have and probably still don't have, and that we need to develop as quickly as possible. So that was the idea of Replicator 1. And we can talk about the questions about what success that has had and whether it is continuing under the new administration, but I will leave those to the side for now and move on to the next slide, please. So then in September 24, the Replicator 2 initiative was announced. And so this was coming up from requests from various stakeholders to not only increase the department's ability to develop and deploy small attritable drones for its own use, but also, as I alluded to earlier, improving our ability to counter small drones. These are, it is possible to do it with some of the defensive weapons that we have and defensive systems that we have. Those are also either somewhat scattered or sort of disproportionately expensive for taking out small drones, right? So there's a lot of thinking about how best to do that in a comprehensive way that covers different levels, different heights of airspace, as well as different types of drones. And so the idea here was to develop and procure new counter small UAS systems within a 24-month time span. And so the first solicitation from the Defense Innovation Unit and the Joint Counter Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems Office went out for this in May of 2025. And next slide, please. So with that, I will hand it off to Taylor.
Great, thanks, Eric. Okay, so the next chunk of slides are going to be separated into kind of key players, programs, what's going on within the DoD. This next section is going to focus on some programs within the DoD. They're going to talk about programs that have developed attritable systems for the DoD, either historically or currently. And I also just kind of want to preface this section with, as Deanna had alluded, attritable warfare is constantly evolving. And in an effort to keep this distro a public release, we don't have all the information in here. It's going to be kind of more of a general overview. When there were updates to this information, we tried to include them as well. But again, this is going to be more of a general overview. So starting with the US Air Force, they have their low-cost attritable aircraft technology program. They've had that for a couple of years, the LCAT program. The Air Force is working on and has been working on attritable UAVs to increase combat capacity, survivability of warfighters, and also to create modular options for acquisition and operations. And as you can see, and one of the most popular systems that came from this program was the XQ-58A in 2019. This came from the LCAT's low-cost attritable strike demonstration. So it helped to design, develop, and test the system. The XQ-58 was also tested through 2021, but then actually carried over to their Project Skyboard and completed a successful flight series in 2022. Excuse me. The U.S. Air Force also oversees the DMAPS program, or Design for Manufacture of Attritable Aircraft Primary Structure program, mouthful. They focus on designing and testing attritable aircraft fuselages and wings. The DMAPS team also has collaborated with University of Dayton Research Institute, Kratos, AMP Tech, Hawthorne Composites, a handful of other organizations to help continue manufacturing the aircraft's parts and allowing the low cost with a focus on future testing and demonstrations. It's also worthy to note that the XQ-67A also stemmed from and kind of originated from this LCAT program, but we'll discuss that on a later slide. So as mentioned, the LCAT program has a big partnership with UDRI. So these are just some examples of ongoing projects that UDRI offers that are have to do with attrition warfare. So they offer system level capabilities. You can see each project is in a wheel, ranging from aerial refueling studies to braided fuselage demonstrations, wing structure design, manufacturing demonstrations, etc. Other programs also seen within the United States Air Force. We have the Offboard Sensing System, or OBSS. It was originally created under AFRL, and it aimed to use sensors to extend the range and sensing during missions, prioritizing human life, which kind of Deanna talked about a little bit in her intro with talking about what attrition means and attritable. So many different, so many different definitions, but that was kind of an important part of it. It also aimed to demonstrate an open architecture UAV to help meet this goal of, rapid time to market, low acquisition cost. Also, OBSS aims to build future iterations from common US government-owned system architectures, also allowing for quick adaptations. So AFRL also partnered with Kratos. We'll have some more information about Kratos later on in a couple slides to develop an OBSS, not really expected to be in service for an entire lifetime, but will meet near-peer adversary threats. This solution from Kratos is aiming to be offered close to about $2 million, and they're still saying that it will still provide a high performance versus cost system. And kind of briefly mention Project Skyborg. This we'll talk a little bit more with the Kratos slide as well, but the XQ-58A carried over to this project and continued to complete successful flight series in 2022. And again, as Deanna mentioned earlier, a lot of this information came from our state-of-the-art report that came out at the end of 2024. So when there were updates, we tried to add them. It's not on the slide, but I wanted to mention the US Army. They just, a few days ago, we saw had a Congressional Research Service report released about Army small UASs. So there was something there called the Purpose-Built Attritable System, the PBAS, that the Army is working on. And it is aiming to provide a first-person view drone capability for Army platoons. And according to this report, the SBAS consists of 2 10-inch air vehicles and 4 5-inch air vehicles, both having modular payloads that can integrate and employ a variety of lethal and non-lethal armaments and munitions. All right, so this next chunk of slides was the meat and potatoes of the report. We wanted to really find who was doing what in attrition warfare related to the DoD and the US government. Who was doing research, development, prototyping, anything that we could find that, again, was open source. So we are going to discuss kind of what we call key players or organizations that were and are continuing to work in attrition warfare. The framework of the handful of slides that we're going to kind of end with, it's going to upfront give you an organization's name, their system's name that is said to be attritable, if there was cost information, any important or relevant DoD contracts, and some key features. You'll also see on some of the slides a table of specs. I'm not going to read through all of those. You can read through them on your own. We might pull out some key information there, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how the next couple slides were going to play out. All right. Oh, and also to note, these are listed alphabetically by organization. So first, we're starting with AeroVironment. AeroVironment offers the Switchblade 600. This was actually selected, one of the ones, selected for Replicator 1. It's been featured in the Russo-Ukraine conflict, Syria, and Iraq. It can engage larger, hardened targets at a greater distance. Some features: man-portable, extended range loitering munition systems, has an anti-armor warhead. And in August of 2024, the Army awarded AeroVironment a $1 billion contract for delivery over the next 5 years. This is one of the largest contracts that you'll see that we talked about. The cost for each of these Switchblades is estimated to be about $100,000. And you can see a picture here. When available, we will have pictures included. Due to some legal reasons, if there's not an image available, we didn't either get permissions or it's just not available because it's still in development. So next we have BAE. In 2022, BAE, they released 2 internally funded and developed UAVs that were designed to be expendable and replaceable, and it's mentioned that they are aiming to be attritable. They do have some images on their website. In reaching out to get more information from them, we weren't able to get any permission, so that's why there's no image available. But they are aimed to be used for ISR. Most of these attritable systems are for the purpose of ISR, but can be used for some other missions, as we'll talk about. There is really not a lot out there about these, so not much to kind of update this slide with. Boeing offers the MQ-28 Ghost Bat. This was previously it was Boeing's ATS, or their air power teaming system. And then when they signed a contract in 2024 with the Royal Australian Air Force, they kind of switched gears, named it, started calling it the MQ-28 Ghost Bat. The cost is $2 to $3 million per system, and it is designed to work as a smart team with an existing military aircraft to help complement and extend missions. Boeing, in our talk, suggested it can be used on the front line when teamed with manned aircraft for ISR missions, and is about 38 feet long and can fly up to 2,000 nautical miles. The next few slides are going to be General Atomics. They offer a few different attritable systems. So the first one is that you see here is the Sparrowhawk. And actually they have two attritable drones under their air-launched effects program, both with the goal of being able to launch the drones from other UAVs, particularly the MQ-9 or something similar, or helicopters. But they offer the Eaglet, which is an expendable drone designed for single use, and then the Sparrowhawk. The Sparrowhawk is intended for multiple flights and missions. One intended use is to strike targets found by an attritable drone fleet. Again, ISR missions. It can provide collaborative autonomy for kill chain closure, can distribute and disaggregate sensors across the battlefield, operate below weather sensor coverage, etc. The cost for this system was not disclosed. General Atomics also has their Gambit system series. This was awarded a $17.8 million contract in 2021 with AFRL's OBSS program. They debuted this in March 2022. Not much more information to be included, but it is expected, and it's hoping to look like a mini fighter jet purposely. So it will be able to operate in contested environments, long endurance ISR, air-to-air combat, high fidelity trainer, and combat recon. Then we have General Atomics XQ-67A. So this is an autonomous collaborative platform successfully tested in February 2024. It kind of stems back with the LCATS program that provided technology and research to the OBSS program, which resulted in this development and testing of the system. It is aiming to use a common chassis approach for its design and aims to allow other UASs to be rapidly replicated on a standard genus chassis. Next slide. All right, and as mentioned before, talk a little bit about Kratos and XQ-58A. And I guess I'll also kind of caveat a lot of these systems with the systems that are included kind of fit the definition of attrition that Deanna talked about and defined at the beginning. And I know we'll all talk about kind of at the end. The definition for attrition is different between every service, every branch. Cost range changes. So these fit into the definition that we use for the purpose of the SOAR. And as things change with Replicator and new things that are going on with the Pentagon and Congress, some of these systems might not be considered attritable eventually. But I just kind of wanted to caveat that with as we continue with these slides. All right, Kratos' Valkyrie. As I mentioned, it was originally developed by AFRL and Kratos as part of their LCAS program. It carried over to their Project Skyboard also, and has had successful flight series as in 2022. The Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, Fighters and Advanced Aircraft Directorate, awarded them a $37.7 million contract. Kratos is also working on and testing something called an autonomous attritable aircraft experimentation campaign to help support the Skyboard ACS. And then, we mentioned earlier that Kratos is working on this OBSS solicitation. Northrop Grumman's Model 437. This was a concept that they kind of came up with and were trying to create and deploy and develop starting in 2021. It is a stealth demonstration aircraft. It had its first successful flight in August 2024 with the potential cost of $5 to $6 million. No image available for this one. There are some out there, but for the purposes of this talk, we weren't able to include it. Next, we have Yates Electrospace Corporation. They offer their Silent Aero Contested Logistics System 300, or the CLS 300. It's a long-range powered cargo attritable UAS that can conduct supply missions, overland delivery for contested environments, essentially, is in the name. So propulsion and flight tests were conducted in late 2024. It can also take off from multiple ground surfaces, including naval vessels and unimproved surfaces, also being able to be released from the air. They were awarded a SBIR contract, $1.8 million from AFWorks to design and test the CLS 300. So on to Skydio. I know you heard Eric mention Skydio. They are a huge player in the drone world. I'm sure most of you have heard of them. Skydio offers the X10D and X2D. A kind of a general comment. Skydio's drones, they've been used for every type of mission you can think of, for every branch of the DoD, Five Eyes militaries, and also throughout NATO. So the X2D also won the Army Short Range Reconnaissance Program, their first tranche, and is currently competing for the next one with their new X10D. X2D also was part of the U.S. Marine Corps Short Range Short Endurance Program and the DIU's AI for Small Unit Maneuvers Program. Skydio has, as we move into the X10D, which costs about $25,000 per unit, Skydio has over thousands of drones operating in Ukraine currently, so the X10D is one of them. And also the X10D, it offers a modular high-resolution visual and radiometric thermal cameras, night sense, so it allows 24/7 operations, obstacle avoidance technology that can lower the cognitive load for quicker decision-making. And finally, it's being used for scouting convoys and battlefield maneuvers. It can also build 2D and 3D models on board in real time. So big players in this area. Teal drones, they have their Teal 2 that they're kind of marketing as Attritable. It's an EOIR UAS used for SSR missions. It's also Blue UAS certified. Their Teals also, they're currently working with the Army on possible uses for this ISR drone. They've received a $5.2 million contract to provide 344 copies of this to the DLA, who is acquiring the drones for U.S. Air Force Security Forces as well. The Teal 2 costs between $13,000 and $17,000. And in chatting with them recently, it was kind of interesting to note, especially with the Replicator Initiative and rapid development, that all these organizations are trying to ramp up prototyping and development and supply chain. So Teal's current production capacity at the beginning of the year was between 100 and 200 drones a month, averaging 1,800 yearly. But they've ramped up their production to really meet Replicator's demands, and they are targeting 1,000 drones a month with their current facility, also anticipating adding additional facilities to help reach this goal. Kinetic has the Jackdaw. This didn't have not much information out there. It's kind of tight-lipped. I chatted with a couple of representatives from Kinetic. They are aiming to have this be an attritable drone used for ISR, electronic warfare, threat representation, the usual. It's being marketed as low cost, but the cost was not disclosed, but disposable as well. So we included it for the purpose of our attrition definition. Definitely a little bit smaller endurance, 3.5 hours. Moving on. The Sierra Nevada Corporation has their Launched Effects, or LE, aircraft. This is being described as a low-risk, low-cost, high-value solution for ISR missions that include, as you can kind of see, battlefield delivery, electronic attack, mission reconnaissance, multiple delivery targets, etc. The image here is showing the activation stages because the LE aircraft is tailless and it has an unfolding flying wing configuration. It's foldable. The entire thing is foldable with a wingspan of 13 feet. It has a quiet electric propulsion with beyond line of sight data link for extended reach, offering secure RF line of sight digital data links from the aircraft to the host aircraft and control station. It can be used for glide and powered flight. Okay. And then finally, you will talk about the Skyfish, who offer the Osprey and the M6. So they have two attritable drones, one smaller, one's bigger. The Osprey is an attritable quadcopter for ISR purposes, and the M6 is considered attritable based on being lightweight, used for carrying payloads, again, and the cost. So that is kind of a very quick overview of who on a distro A level is doing what, important players, important contracts, cost. We're going to kind of end it with everyone chiming in of just next steps, what's going on in the future, tying this all together, and then we'll have some questions and answers. So I'll have Deanna and Eric go ahead and chime in.
Thanks, Taylor. So, as we described, the term for attritable is not, so in the replicator initiative, they are trying to work on solidifying a definition for each branch, but they really haven't set that in stone. And I know they say that 2 million is the lower cost of it, but it really depends on the mission and the drone and a lot of other things. Eric?
Sure. Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I just highlight a couple of things here, right? I've been looking at the chat while Taylor was presenting as well, and it's clear that the definition question is one that is complicated, and this was very clear to me in my research for this conceptualization component of the report, is that, you know, there are attempts to try and impose a definition for the purposes of procurement and for the purposes of contracting and things like that. I think it's clear just from the conversation here, but also from the larger set of research that I've done, that that definition does not necessarily align with what people necessarily find the most useful. It also, I should emphasize, does not align with what is actually happening on the field in places like Ukraine and China, right? They, you know, there's been some discussion of the blue UAS list that the Defense Intelligence Unit has been tasked with generating for, you know, American-made drones that are considered expendable. The chatter that I've read about and heard, right, is that those are not very interesting to the customers that would ultimately be using them for a variety of reasons, right? They might be too expensive, they might not have the same capabilities they need, the production might not be fast enough, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But I will stop there, and we can talk about questions and anything else you guys are interested in.
All right, thank you. We had a very active chat, which I think is great. Some questions, some comments were put in, but the Q&A is now open. We'll step through these now one by one. I'll read these questions out loud for the benefit of those on the phone, and then I'll give the presenters an opportunity to answer those questions. So the first one we have is from Neil. He says, so when Secretary Hegseth says the DoD wants attritable and lethal UAS, this doesn't mean one-way strike, which would be expendable. Instead, I guess it's something like drones, which can be produced faster than adversaries can destroy our UASs. Is that correct?
So I can speak a little bit on this one. The announcement, the memo from Secretary Hegseth, as well as the accompanying executive order, kind of focused on two broad tactics for addressing this problem, wherein the DoD does not have what it considers to be sufficient amounts and quality of low-cost drones, right? The first is procuring more from US manufacturers, who the memo characterizes as world-leading in this area. And the second is clearing any bureaucratic hurdles to adopting those particular drones, specifically on the DIU Blue UAV list, for use in the force, right? And again, I guess so there are two, not concerns necessarily on how, but two open questions that remain for me on that front with regards to what this memo means, with regards to what's going on in the department and all of these previous programs that we talked about, right? One is that perhaps for reasons that are understandable, there's not been a lot of engagement by the current administration on the replicator initiative. So it's not yet clear how interesting that initiative is to the current administration. It is not yet clear how those definitions might apply to what Secretary Hegseth wants in his new initiative. And it's not yet clear where the money is going to flow. And the second is the thing that I was sort of hinting at in this conclusion slide, which is that, it's great, of course, to procure more from American manufacturers and to make sure that those procurements can get into the hands of warfighters. The problem that comes back all the time when people talk to the people who actually want to use these in the US Armed Forces is that those drones are not as good as the other things that they see elsewhere, right? And so in my reading, the current memo does not yet address that issue. There are lots of ways that it could be done in terms of, bolstering the industrial base and speeding up design processes and things like that. I don't yet see much of that publicly in terms of what's happening today.
Thank you. Next question from Dan. What does the landscape of electronic warfare on Attritable UAS look like? Are there ads for EA, ES, EP, decoys? What is most desirable?
Taylor, unless you have something on this, I think this is me as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of these are going to be you, Eric.
Okay, yeah. So, this report was not tasked with looking specifically at counter small UAV, efforts. I, of course, did come across a lot of it in the research. I would say the highest level way to answer this is that the department as a whole is focused mostly on small drones for reconnaissance. There is a lot of research happening in terms of what they might be useful for loitering munitions and also for applying electronic warfare tactics and things like that. That has not, so far as I've seen, progressed into policies and procurement and things like that. So there are, of course, asks from all over the force. I don't have a good sense of how far they've gotten.
Thank you. Next question from Mike. Is anybody anywhere in our government agencies, services, etc., looking at UAS swarms in the context of developing a CUAS capability, i.e. swarm on adversary swarm, swarm on adversary sub-swarm, all the way down to swarm on individual adversary UASs?
So I think this is a similar question to the previous one, in that, yes, there is, of course, interest in it and it's being researched. I don't think there has been a lot of movement yet on moving that research into development and procurement and deployment. So just for context, right, I am actually currently working on a project on China's potential use of drone swarms. So as some of you may know, this was the end of last year. They revealed a big drone mothership, which kind of perked everybody's ears up about what their swarm capabilities might be. So I'm looking into that now, and my understanding is that that will help inform the ways that the department might think about using swarms in the future, but I am not privy to all of those discussions, so I can't be too specific on that front. Taylor, did any of your work come across swarm, like mentions of swarms for these existing platforms?
Not for the existing ones, no. I know I've done a couple, as our opening video mentioned, TIs, technical inquiries, on counter drone swarms. I'd have to refresh my memory on what I had come across, but it wasn't related to like attritable. So I could definitely research that a little bit more for the person who asked the question. But I don't know off the top of my head.
Sounds good. Thank you. Next question from David. Any consideration about payloads, sensors, and communications?
In terms of choosing which ones were attritable?
Yes, I assume so.
Honestly, when doing this report, this was really kind of at the very beginning of Replicator. So no, the short answer was no. It was more so based on cost. Was the purpose built for loss? Is it being able to be produced cheaper? And the cost is like we've all mentioned, is a huge debate. You know, 20 million is not cheap, and you know, you're going to send 20 million aircrafts, and if they don't come back, that's still not a a small cost. So no, to answer that question, no, that wasn't what we looked at when researching who to include in this list.
Thanks. Next question from Yuri. Are small arm rounds attributable? Artillery shells, guided missiles, what's so different about small drones?
I guess I can take a stab at this one. It's outside the scope of the report. The sort of key thing that the Defense Department, at least in the case of Replicator, wanted to do with the definition of attritable was distinguish it from entirely expendable, right? These are things that reach a level where they want them to be recoverable, but maybe they're okay with a higher level of loss, something like that. It's also specific to drones. And so I don't know, you know, certainly my research for this project did not reveal any thinking explicitly in public about whether we should also, you know, adopt this kind of attritable framework for other types of munitions. This is something that we were only looking at in the context of UAVs, and to my knowledge is largely specific to UAVs, but I may very well be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that.
And that's what I also saw in my research as well.
Thank you. Next question from Connor. How are general safety releases or either airworthiness authority considerations being addressed, schedule and cost, especially for some of the larger UAS or loitering munitions that pose significant risk to non-participants? This is a significant barrier to entry for large uncrewed systems and limits their use across the broader military and civil spectrum.
Yeah, I guess I can say two things on this, although again, it was not a direct focus of the work for this report. One is that, you know, the reason, you know, I guess it was 10 to 15 years ago, right? Many of the service branches were experimenting with commercial drones, right? So that became a concern at some point because they were worried about the security of the communication systems and things like that. So that was halted. And that's the reason why DIU was ultimately tasked with developing a list of drones that were approved for military use. And my understanding is that that approval process, although I don't have details, is focused on making sure that they're sufficiently secure for use by the US forces, wherever they may be. Right. So that's one way to think about it. The other thing that I can say just briefly is that the executive order associated with Hegseth's public memo did explicitly mention that they want to commission studies from the various aviation authorities to think about how they might best streamline those processes to get faster approval for drones and being used and things like that. But I don't have many more specifics beyond the content of that actual executive order at this stage. Taylor or Deanna, do you have anything?
No, not for that one.
Neither.
Thank you. The next question from Daniel. I see the Switchblade is tube launched. Is that a common launch tool?
I've seen it a couple other places. Specifically for this report, it's one of the only ones that is tube launched. I don't know, Eric, if you've seen in your work similar ones that are tube launched as well, but I don't. For attrition, I don't think, I'm looking for my notes. I came across many tube launched.
My sense, and this was not my specific focus, but my sense is that tube launched is not as common as other methods of launch.
Yeah,
that's a general sense.
I've seen it in other research that I've done. Again, not as common, but not necessarily for an attritable UAV. So hopefully that somewhat answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from John. He says the SecDef drone dominance memo uses the words expendable and consumable, but not attributable. While I agree with the demarcation briefed here, what is the utility of framing this initiative as attributable?
So I guess this is a conceptualization question as well, and the short answer is I don't know. You know, my general sense from observing this, you know, I'm not in the department, of course, I'm a contractor, but everybody seems to be, including Secretary Hegseth as well as Deputy Undersecretary Hicks, seem to be thinking of the same problem, right? Which is that we need to figure out ways to more quickly develop and adopt cheaper UAVs that are expendable to some degree, right? My sense is that for a variety of reasons, the current administration and Secretary Hegseth do not want to just piggyback on the replicator initiative. There are a lot of potential possible reasons for that. So they are pushing forward with their own conceptualizations of what's going on here, right? And so I agree that creates some potential confusion, but frankly, the attritable definition in the first replicator initiative, from the perspective of an analyst, my perspective, never really made much sense to me, right? The thing that we're concerned about in terms of cheap drones is these smaller swarms of drones that cost, between a few thousand and a few tens of thousands, right? That's what is concerning about China's development. That's what's concerning about that's what's, I guess, exciting about what the Ukraine is doing against Russia in the war over there. So I would urge people listening to this to sort of contribute their own ideas here and not be too fixated on what that particular definition means, because there's a lot of disagreement about it, right? I think there's a lot of room for proposing new ways to think about this that might help us get to where we need to be faster.
Thanks. Next question for Michael. Do all of these systems require a pilot? Are some autonomous?
These all were autonomous.
Which is interesting because not everything that is, in the broader attritable category, including expendable, would be autonomous, right? A lot of what Ukraine is using, for instance, are, pilots connected to them via fiber optic cables and things like that. So.
Yep. A lot of people have asked questions about the slides. I put a link to the slides in the chat, as well as a link to the state-of-the-art report. A couple of people asked about the state-of-the-art report and when it was published at the end of 2024. Our most recent question that we got says from Carolina, is there an intent to update this report to include the vast changes that the DoD is undergoing in the UAS space?
I would love to do that. And I guess I can also just say too, we're aware that this report came out, about a year ago, and then that was about a year of research that went into that report. So some of it is, I don't want to say it's dated, but we know so much has gone on in the world of attrition and expendable and replicator that I would love to have an update, a new version. And as all of us know, government, especially, things take time to get approved, to go through, levels of PAO and things like that. So I wish that this could have come out a little bit closer to the date and the release of the SOAR, so it would make a little bit more sense in when we're presenting this information. But I would definitely like to be able to update what's now more currently going on in the world of attrition warfare.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add there is that, I've been following this, not in the intensive way that the report required, but I've been following it since the report came out. And, there has been an enormous amount of development in terms of specific platforms and ideas for using them and things like that. This is my personal assessment, I would say that, as a whole, the department has not moved very far from the conceptualizations that it put into place a couple of years ago, right? I think there is interest in doing that, but I haven't seen much concrete come out publicly yet. So I think those discussions that we highlighted within the Pentagon and between Congress and the Pentagon are very much still ongoing.
And I think the key thing you just said there, Eric, is like in the public space. This was also something that we wanted to keep distro A. We know there's more information out there. We know there's things that can be talked about in this public space. So that was something also we kind of toyed with of how do we get information out that everybody's interested in on a very popular topic. What do we include? What do we not include? So lots of different ways that we could update this or talk about it. But yeah, I think that was key.
All right. I'm scrolling through the chat. I'm not seeing any new questions. Mike, I see you have your hand up. All participants are muted, but feel free to use the chat to ask any questions, and we'll try to make sure we get to that within these next couple of minutes. I see in the chat there's a couple of comments about people asking for contact information for the presenters, as well as a list of contact information for people who have attended this webinar. You please reach out to us directly offline, and we can see how we can share some of that information for you. But
I'm
we
sending
do
my
have
email in the chat.
okay.
Yeah,
Sounds good. So we have a couple new questions that did come in really quickly. So our next question from Eric, he's asking about cyber requirements. Are there any cyber requirements for these systems, or is it waived since it is an expendable unit?
If that is referring to, communication cybersecurity, then yes, there are requirements that are imposed by DIU's program to select drones that are suitable for this program.
All right, I think we're a couple of minutes before 1, but I think that kind of addressed everybody's questions for today. I'd like to thank our presenters for the great work they did on the state-of-the-art report, as well as this webinar presentation. I can tell by the activity in the chat, this is obviously something of great interest to the community. I think we had over 400 people live attend, which is, I think, close to a record that we've had for the IACs. As I said before, the link to the presentation, as well as the state-of-the-art report, has been put in the chat. If you couldn't get to your question today, please submit a technical inquiry. We'll do some research. Feel free to reach out to us directly. We'll get you in contact with Eric as well. And the recording to this will be up on the DSIAC webpage, as well as the YouTube page within a day or so. So feel free to reach back out to us. On the way out, please fill out the surveys. We actually do look at that feedback. If you have any suggestions on how we can improve or different topics you'd like to see on our monthly webinar series, please let us know. But that's all that I have. Taylor, Deanna, Eric, if you have any parting comments, now would be the time.
No, just thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see Mike Bruce had one quick question, which I think I can answer quickly, which he asked who tasked the services, who's the action office at the joint level. The short answer is that there isn't one, right? This is the sense in which it's still not fully developed. The services are doing this on their own for a while, and the current effort is to try and figure out what the joint force as a whole should do. But with that, yeah, thank you all very much for attending and for your questions. I thought this was a great discussion, and I'm fascinated with this topic, as you might be able to tell. So thank you for your time and attention.
Great.